Young people aren't lazy, bone idle, just want to spend time on the internet. What we're finding is young people are looking for opportunities. They want their voices to be heard. They want to be leaders. They love the outdoors. Like, this is a real different narrative to what we're hearing from media outlets.
Welcome to Mad Influence, a podcast about the power of influence and what happens when people choose to use it for good. I'm Helen Saul, and after a decade in marketing, I've seen how influence can be used for good, bad, and everything in between. In this series, I meet founders, campaigners, and creatives who are choosing to use their platforms to make a meaningful impact, to understand how ideas spread, create connection, and drive change. Today, I'm joined by Krish Patel. Krish works with people and organisations to help them tell real stories from their own lives about change, resilience, and the moments that shape who we become. Through his organisation Tales to Inspire, he's spent years creating spaces for people to share lived experience, whether that's in workshops, talks, or community settings, often working with those whose voices aren't always heard. Alongside this, he's also the co-founder of StoryOak, which films people telling their life stories, often for families who want to capture the experiences of parents or grandparents in their own words for future generations. As Krish puts it, what drives me every day is the opportunity to connect with people on a human level and to help them see the extraordinary within the ordinary. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Krish.
Well, thank you so much, Helen, for inviting me on here.
You're so welcome. I'm especially excited about this episode because you're from very near me, I believe. You're based in Bolton, is that right?
That is, I'm from Bolton, I am indeed.
Yeah, so you're from Bolton, I'm from Bury. I think I saw in my research you used to play professionally for Bury Football Club. Is that correct?
I did, yeah, I used to. Many lifetimes ago, it feels like. But yeah, I used to play. I played from Bury from 13 up until I was 20 years old, yeah.
Wow. Yeah, very impressive. Well, really happy to have you on here. We'll be talking about all aspects of what's brought you to where you are today and what you're doing now. And I thought maybe a good place to start could be if you were talking to maybe a friend or someone that didn't know fully what you did, how would you describe what your role is on a day-to-day basis?
That's the hardest question I could ask. So my role on a day-to-day basis is I feel like I'm the captain of a ship, but I also sometimes feel like I'm in the engine room of that ship, trying to put coal into that ship to make sure it's going, but then ensuring that actually sometimes the guests on the ship need to be fed and watered. So my aim is to try and always have the vision of what I do within Tales to Inspire, within StoryOak, within the work that I do. But basically, my day-to-day is ensuring that I can support lived experience and really see the potential within that, whatever work we're doing, and to try and be as creative as possible. Currently, my New Year's resolution for this year, for 2026, is creativity. It's to show that it's not just about to-do lists. So that's where I'm at. I know it's probably gone around the answer, but there's so much to it to explain.
Yeah. And you talk about being the captain of a ship. And from my understanding, there's kind of two ships because there is Tales to Inspire and there is also StoryOak. So how do you split your time between those two things?
The way I view work is probably different to the way most people view work. I view work as part of life, and I view everything within my life as one. Many people separate their lives into this friendship group, family, work, and I think life can be so expansive. It's exhausting trying to do that. So I'd rather just say, you know what? Tales to Inspire needs me now. StoryOak needs me now. StoryOak's at more of a beginning stage than where Tales to Inspire is, which means that I'm much more, I probably spend 75 to 80% of my time on Tales to Inspire and 20% of my time on working time on StoryOak. It's not a routine that this is the amount of time I'm going to spend, but it's more of a flexible model.
Yeah. When you mention that you like to blend it all together, maybe not everybody does that impact work-life balance at all?
It does. But my work is so purpose-led and so like, this is what I'm meant to do on this earth. This is what I love. It lights me up. So it's not like I'm doing a traditional work. You know, I see there's 3 reasons to work, and it's an amazing, amazing teaching, actually from Buddhism, and it talks about the powers of beauty, gain, and good. And when you're in the workplace, if you can have one of those, brilliant. If you can have two, amazing. If you've got all three, fantastic. So beauty is, do you enjoy it? Do you enjoy that workplace? Gain is what you're getting out of it. Is it financial? Is it knowledge? Is it wisdom? Is it relationships? And good, are you impacting other people's lives or something positively? So my previous work, I didn't enjoy it. I wasn't impacting people's lives. I wasn't gaining anything out of it. I had none out of the three. So when people said, "Oh, you left your job to start up a business that had no product and you didn't know what you were going to do," there was no risk for me because I wasn't getting anything out of it. So when I started Tales to Inspire initially, at least I knew that I was going to do something that I was gaining knowledge and I was doing good. I had 2 out of the 3. The beauty side of it, I didn't know what I was doing actually at the time, so I didn't know how great it was going to be. The gain is probably the hardest, is the financial, and that's a big sacrifice I've had to make. I've got lots of friends who have taken financial as their biggest one, and I'm probably not where they're at. Well, nowhere near where they're at actually, but it's something that you know what, I'm willing to go with that because I know it feels like it's the right thing to do for me.
Do you think that's something that maybe there's not enough honesty about because there's a pressure sometimes to display yourself as being so successful that maybe founders aren't sharing the actual difficult financial side of things?
100%. I feel like entrepreneurship and going your own way can be glorified so much. I do say that people have the potential to be entrepreneurs, but that security that you instantly lose can also be seen as freedom. But the balance of freedom, for example, I work all hours of the day, but I'm also, yesterday at 11 a.m. till 2 p.m., I went fishing with my nephew, on a Tuesday. So it's a really challenging one, I think. But entrepreneurship and the way that we view this, it can be glorified. And I think it's really important to say that it's not for everyone. And everyone has a role to play within social good is for everyone. We all have a responsibility to do good. That's our base level of humanity, to be humans. And being human is putting something back into the world in which we live. So yeah, there's a bit of a contrast, but it doesn't have to be through entrepreneurialism.
Yeah, it's clear that you have a strong sense of purpose, a sense that this is what you wanted to be doing and what you felt you should be doing, and also that you really enjoy it as well. And you've talked about how you moved away from the thing that you didn't like and how it made sense to go into something that you really enjoyed. How did you determine what that thing was? How did you get to that point where you thought, I want to tell people stories? What was the thinking behind that?
There was not much thinking. There was more doing, to be honest, if I'm going to be absolutely honest with you, Helen. So the way this worked out, because I am very different now to the person I was. I was at the age of 20 years old. I was a professional football player. I cared about cars, parties, fashion, holidays, how big someone's house was, money. I cared about very superficial things in life. I had no interest in social good, like zero. I cared about my family and I cared about my friends. But outside of that, I didn't know anything about worldwide politics, news, community organizations that were local, volunteering. It wasn't a thing on my radar. And I then got an offer to go and play football in America for 6 years. The first year and a half was a real challenge, living outside of the country. We'd been lied to. We were promised things that didn't happen. And one person changed the way I viewed the world. He's a person who was in my football team. He was called Gabby. And Gabby was from Brazil. And he always was annoyingly positive. Right. And I say annoyingly positive because that's sometimes how I come across nowadays. But I couldn't stand being in the same room as Gabby at that time. I had nothing to look positively at. And he was like this positive burst of energy. And one day I said, Gabby, I'm leaving America. I'm going back to Bolton. And he said to me, Krish, were you happy in Bolton? I said, no, that's why I left. And he said, you've always run away from your obstacles, Krish. But life is full of obstacles and you'll never overcome anything in your life if you keep running away from those obstacles. I'd never embraced obstacles. They were problems. And to realization point that, wow, obstacles are a part of life. Like, I know it's obvious, but I was like, you have to embrace it and you have to internalize it and you have to realize that as an opportunity for your life to grow. And he took me under his wing and he did something. He saw the potential in me. He saw the best version of me, even when I didn't see it. And I stayed in the US for 6 years. And by the end of that 6 years, I was a completely different human, to the point when I came back to England and I see my parents and I was telling them what I was up to. They were like, who is this person? Like, this is not the Krish that we know. By that time, 2016, I'd realized that I'd wanted to run across the UK. I was going to do 4 marathons in 4 days from coast to coast. I was going to build a school over in Uganda. I was basically purpose driven. I wanted to make a difference in people's lives. But the reason this happened is that people started coming to me, sharing their stories. Completely out, I say out of the blue. If I look deeper into it, it's not. It's because I changed. And when you change, your environment starts to change. When I started to do that, people started coming to me asking for, Krish, can I have 20 minutes of your time? Can I speak to you about a personal challenge? Talking about their mental health, talking about all sorts of deep and dark things that they may have not shared with anyone else. And I was like, what's going on here? But when I left those spaces, I always felt so empowered. And it wasn't the fact that I was doing anything. I was just creating a people to share. And that was the seed that when I came back to England in 2018, I just built this schoolhouse in Uganda. I was doing all this stuff. I just swam 53 miles, all the lakes in the Lake District, and I was helping. I was running a homeless outreach organisation in Manchester. I was working a job that I didn't particularly like. And I was like, all I want to do is help people. How do I do that in the full time, every moment of my life? And the question then I started to ask myself is, where are my role models? And the realization was that all my role models were celebrities. They were online. They were sports people. They weren't people from communities. So then I thought, I'm going to start a blog and I'm going to share the stories of inspiring people in our communities. And I'm going to put helplines at the bottom of that blog. I'm going to call it Tales to Inspire. Let's see what happens. And that blog, we shared an amazing story of an amazing friend, Danny, who'd been homeless and he got himself off the streets, and that blog went viral. And that kind of started the momentum of sharing stories and people's life stories. And it's been a really special journey. The realization of the power of stories. Without stories, we have nothing. But the question or the challenge I was having is we didn't know the stories of the people we spend the majority of our time with. I'm talking about parents. I'm talking about siblings, colleagues at work. Like, how often do you spend hours with these people and not even know? You only know them in their work environment, and you don't realize, wow, Helen has overcome all these things, has traveled the world, and all I know is Helen's work life, you know? So these are the things that started to uncover through the time of starting Tales to Inspire. It wasn't me thinking and going with my head and saying, this is what I'm going to do. It was me doing a lot of things and then coming to the conclusion from the research of me doing that I found.
That's such useful context, and it really sets the scene of how it was that you got into the career that you're in now. And I'm sure it's no surprise to you that, as someone that has a podcast and talks to people, and then my day job as well, I work in marketing, I really obviously agree and understand the power of telling people's stories on a level where you're delving deeply into it and really understanding below the surface level stuff what is actually going on. And I think that's really interesting. There's a lot of different things you mentioned there that I'm really keen to ask a bit more about. You talked about your time in America and how when you were younger you were sort of motivated by this lifestyle and status, and then once you were in America you talked about how you felt like maybe you'd been lied to and the opportunities weren't there. And I just wondered what exactly you meant by that specifically.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I was in England and I was 20 years old, I was playing for Bury and I was on a professional contract. Things were great, but I kept getting injured. And by the end of my time at Bury, I'd lost all my confidence. I didn't feel like I had anyone to go to. I was really anxious about going even to training. I was really, really struggling. And when I went to the US, I got an email saying, would you like to come over to America? It's a full ride scholarship in California, close to the beach, living in a mansion. They were the four things, right? And I'm like 20 years old. I'm like, California. And you get your education, right? So you get your scholarship there. And we turned up there, and I was not close to the beach. I was promised San Francisco. I was like 7 hours away from San Francisco. I was in the middle of the mountains. There was 55 players for a 23-person team. I was living in a 3-bedroom house with 13 other people. And it was in Susanville, the town I was in, is home to 3 prisons. There's about 15,000 people in Susanville, and 3/4 of that population are in one of the 3 prisons. And it also has High Desert Prison, which is the biggest maximum security prison in California. So you're starting to get a picture of, like, we'd been promised all this. The scholarship was lied to, didn't have a scholarship. So all these things that we were promised weren't there, but we were a bunch of 55 people from all over the world in this random prison town in America. Like, what are we doing here? So we had a choice, was either to stick it through together or to leave. And many people decided to leave. And I just had a celebration do back in Bolton saying, I'll see you all in 4 years. There was not a chance on earth, because of my ego, that I was going home after 4 weeks, you know? So I was going to stick it out and see how it was. And I knew that I really was unhappy back here in Bolton. So I just had to delve it out. But they were the challenges initially. Going out to the US was the fact that we were lied to.
Did you feel any pressure to kind of keep up this appearance for home if you just had this big celebration do? I ask because I remember I did a year abroad in France. It was my first time living abroad, and to the outside world it looked really glamorous. I was in the south of France on Tibes, like near like Nice and Cannes. I'd again like said goodbye to everyone. Everyone thought I was having a great time. They were all back at home still doing their exams. And I actually had a really hard time at the start. Like, everything that could go wrong went wrong. I had money stolen, just hard getting like place to live, like lots of different things. But I remember when I was messaging home, people would be like, oh, it sounds so amazing. And there was a bit of a pressure there. And I wondered if that's something you experienced at all.
Completely resonate with that, Helen. I didn't share it with anyone at home. I kept it completely to myself. I thought, I don't want them to worry, and I don't want them to bring me back. Whenever I was on the phone, I'd keep it to myself. Just kept it in that environment where we were and got through it, basically. The one thing that I knew that I didn't want my parents to come and visit. To see that, I would have definitely really then had to tell them. That would have been really uncomfortable. But they did come out 2 years later, and then after 2 years, I'd moved to a place called Lake Tahoe, which was beautiful. And I think they came out twice for that, actually. Didn't go out once to the prison town, but they came out to the beautiful place. But it was then that I told them, like, these are the journeys I've been through, and this is what happened. But each to their own. But I just had to, I think, to protect myself more than anything, is to keep it to myself.
And given that you were keeping that to yourself, and you've gone into a career later on where you're really keen on getting out of people the things that they don't share, the stuff that isn't just like their work life, it's everything else. What have you learned about understanding and finding those things from people that they might not initially want to share because maybe they're keeping up appearances, or maybe they're just not ready to?
The thing that I've found from that is there's a timing for everything, right? You can't force something, because you've got to let people process. And I have this debate with my partner, Mel. She's amazing, but we have a very much a different personality trait where anything that happens, I've got to then process that, and then I'll then respond to that. And that might take half a day, it might take a full day, it might take a few days to really have that process. Mel's from the perspective of, I want to know now, and like, let's move on and get through this quick. So I think there's different personality traits and different ways you go about this, but timing is everything. And for me, processing the things that you've been through is so, so important. Having a space to do that is key, whether that's an individual, whether that's groups, whether that's more formal with a therapist or a counselor, whether it's with a group of friends. Accountability buddies are so important. But there's so many different ways you can go about that. But yeah, timing is really key. So I would never, whenever we, with the Tales to Inspire podcast now, we never want anyone to share anything they don't want to. We completely make it clear that, look, this is your story. Please share where you feel you're comfortable to share. at that time. We know that in 12 months' time, you may come back on the podcast and share your story again, and it may be completely different and developed because you've reframed the things that you've been through. Wonderful. So I hope that it's that continued timeline to have spaces to be able to share.
Yeah. Of all of those stories that you've told, are there any that really stand out to you?
This is the impossible question. I'll make some people happy and some people not happy, but I would say it's different depending on the day, the week that you ask me. We've shared so many people's stories, and they're amazing. There's none better or any worse than any others, depending on what I've been through at that time to really resonate with me. The stories that really are resonating with me right now are the stories we've shared around migration and disability and third, young people. So those kind of stories, because I think it's because of the narrative that I'm hearing in the media around those societal challenges, it's very different to the narrative that I'm uncovering through Tales to Inspire and the work that we're doing. Young people aren't lazy, bone idle, just want to spend time on the internet. What we're finding is young people are looking for opportunities. They want their voices to be heard. They want to be leaders. They love the outdoors. Like, this is a real different narrative to what we're hearing from media outlets. And migration, I mean, it's how much more opposite do you want to be with what the media is saying about these narratives? So I think the thing that I've got many favorites. All of them are my favorites. I love them and I listen to the stories all the time. But right now, those three societal challenges are ones that are resonating with me. I've got a soft spot for homelessness as well, just because I ran a homeless outreach group for 5 years. So yeah, I know I've not answered that question with favorite, but I know that whoever's listening to this from my Champions Network will not be happy if I've chosen one.
No, that's fine. You don't have to pick a specific one. I think it's really interesting to hear you pull out particular topics. For example, migration, which is one that we see a really negative narrative in the news. And how do you balance the fact that sometimes it's almost like an uphill battle? And I want to say that I speak from the experience of, until very recently, I was working at homeless housing charity. And whatever we share online, we always receive a lot of like anti-migration sentiment, and we spend a lot of time trying to battle that. And so I know that the algorithm is working against us. I know that negative points of view and perspective are deliberately promoted because that's what gets clicks. And so how do you deal with that side of things when you're obviously sharing positive stories? How do you counteract that?
Tough. It's really tough. The first story of migration that we shared, story of someone who was living here, was a guy and a really great friend of ours, Jenny Van Mamputu da Costa. He was from DRC, and then he was 20 years homeless in the UK. Basically, his papers were lost by the UK government. He wasn't able to work. He wasn't able to go through these things. He was having such a challenging time. And we shared his story, and we got so much negativity, and I couldn't get my head around it, and it knocked me for six. I was so overwhelmed, and started, am I doing something wrong here? What have I done here? Have I missed something? And it took a lot of processing to realize that actually, no, it's not me who's missed anything. I'm doing what I feel is right, what bridges communities and brings people together to see the true real life story of a human being and what they've been through. I've come to the conclusion that society lacks empathy, and we have a lot of sympathy. We feel sorry for everyone, but do we truly understand what someone's going through? No. How do we do that? We connect to people, we take action, and we overcome our own challenges. If you have a different view, absolutely fine, but dialogue's key. Let's get someone who's a migrant and let's get someone who's got an opposing view on a bench, and let's have a conversation together in a safe space. Let's try and understand and unpack what's going on truly and find the middle ground, if you will, if there is a middle ground. So dialogue's really important, but I just know that doing good takes effort. If I didn't want to do anything that's good of value, I would literally just do nothing. And you'd see a much worse version of me that also doesn't help anyone else either.
Yeah. When you talk there about moving people from sympathy to empathy, what do you think are the most important things? I know you mentioned a couple, like, for example, dialogue, but that really move people from the transition of, I feel sorry for this person, to I actually understand what's going on behind the scenes.
Number one thing that I would say that has transformed that is me meeting different people. It's as simple as that. I've had the fortune to live in the US and meet thousands of different people, right? And over in America from all walks of life. I then went to Africa, and I saw different people's perspectives. I volunteered with homeless people in Manchester and saw completely different perspectives there. But I got to meet so many different types of people that I would not naturally have met. How often are the people that we come across seeing their friends and their family, their work colleagues, and that's it? You know, how often do we actually have a conversation that's not about the weather with someone that's deeper and outside of our natural, what do you call it, tribe, if you will? You know, and I think that's really important, and something that I really encourage people to do is to meet new people from different walks of life. Because when you do that, you start to bridge that gap and start to understand and connect. So that's probably the number one thing that I would say.
Yeah. I mean, I really agree with that. I think it is such an important thing, meeting people from all over and from all different walks of life, and just getting a much wider understanding and appreciation for who we are as a world. Given that you have met so many people and you've lived in different places, are there any common consistencies, like the things that make us human above all else, that you see, whether it's positives or negatives, insecurities, or the things that drive us? Do you see any commonalities?
Yes, is that I'm having a bit of a think. First of all, humans are not meant to be alone. Throughout humanity, we are not supposed to be isolated individuals. We are built to be part of a community. So many of the people I come across, including young people as well, are isolated. They feel like they're the only ones going through what they're going through, and they're not. So to be part of a community, to be able to understand that and to share is really important. Second one is all communities around the world have stories. It's a massive common denominator between everyone, and those stories need to be shared. Third one, people in general want to do good. Yes, there may be some bad people, but most people that you come across want to do good, want to create some kind of value. But most people are lacking purpose. They're lacking why are they put on this earth? What are they doing? Another common denominator, obstacles are a fact of life. Every single one of us is going to go through it, a challenge. But comparison is the thief of joy. It doesn't help, you know, and I think this is something I see a lot is, oh, well, look how bad that person's got it. I shouldn't feel bad. Well, that person's got nothing to do with you. You know, like wherever you're at right now is where you're at. And let's compare yourself to you yesterday and to you tomorrow, what you're going to be. So they're some of the ones. There's probably a million that I could go into. I love that question, by the way, Helen. That's such a good question. I'm going to steal that question.
Please, please do.
But yeah, I love it.
I'm interested in the themes that you picked up there around, obviously, you mentioned isolation, the importance of sharing people's stories, and the need for people to have a purpose. And it makes me think about the role that the internet and social media is playing in this, both good and bad. And do you have any thoughts there in terms of how it's interacting with those themes?
So the internet, whether you look at social media, you can look at AI as well, and you can look at all these different things, right? There's never going to be a more important time as now for humans to be humans. We are becoming more tech-based than we've ever become before. The human aspect of technology is going to be more important than ever. And how we use that is going to be more important than ever. There's another concept. So I practice Nietzschean Buddhism, and I see it as a philosophy that I embrace in every moment of my life. And there's another concept called human revolution. And this talks about, we've had industrial revolutions, we've had technological revolutions. The thing that didn't change and that needed to change is a human revolution. Until we change as people, develop ourselves, see it, that it's the internal way, and we have to have a strong foundation and really care about the community in which we live, nothing will ever change. So from a social media perspective, there's good and there's bad. But what's the common denominator is how we use it as people, right? So how do we use that? So it's down to our values and how we take action for that. So it's the same with AI, and it's going to be the same with the world in which we live. And that's my conclusion to pretty much everything, is everything comes back to us. When people feel so defeated, my narrative is, if humans got us into this state the world's in, sure as hell humans can get ourselves out of it. It's like, we can do this. We can do this because we've got ourselves here. So that's probably the social media side of things. I always try to use it for the good ways. I actually feel like there should be a lot more boundaries and responsibility taken to these social media providers. And I feel like they get away with so much. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah, you've mentioned a couple of values that you've got from Buddhism specifically, and would you say Buddhism is something that is driving everything you do, both work? Well, you've already said that work and life are one. So is that a really key part then of your life?
Absolutely. Buddhism, I say Buddhism drives everything. Buddhism, like, I see Buddhism as life, right? The people don't exist for the religion to carry on. The only reason that it exists is for people to be happy. That's it. And I feel like we get that so upside down. Governments, the only reason government should exist is for the people. Like, that's it. It's not that we're not here to serve the government and to keep that going. No, the government's there to ensure that we're happy, successful, and fulfilled so that that can carry on. And I feel like we get this hierarchy flipped upside down. There's so much to what I believe and what I work on, but one of the keys is the internal way, is that everything's inside of us. We are part of the universe and the universe is part of us. Like, we are literally life, and life exists in every area around us. And it's so special. One moment of life, if you just think about that, the probability, Helen, of you and I having this conversation right now at this time online, it's next to impossible, but it still happened. And I think that's really special. There's something really magical about the aspects that we have. So I just see it as a really big foundation and a value framework for my life to use, to spring from.
I agree, and I think you make a really good point around how special it is when people can meet and have these conversations, and the chances of two people meeting on any given day could be so improbable. And that brings me to StoryOak, and obviously how you have made a big part of your mission telling the stories of parents, of grandparents. And I want to know why you specifically are focusing on family stories and what's the importance of that to you?
Amazing. I think one of the questions that you asked before was talking about commonalities of people around the world. And the one that I missed was legacy. Is that people tend to want to have a legacy and want to know the legacy that they've come from. In 2019, I'd always wanted to capture my granddad's story. I'd always wanted to interview him. I'd always wanted to do it on film, and I wanted to keep it so I could give it to everyone in the family. In 2019, he passed away. And I remember reaching out to my grandma and saying, Grandma, I wish I could speak to Granddad. I wish I could hear his voice. I wish I could just hear him sharing his stories. And Grandma, she said to me, here's the photo album. And I went through the photo album and it was nice. It was great, but it wasn't him, and I was like, how can I do that? And then one of my friends, through Tales to Spire actually, and he's now our head of videography and he runs all of our filmmaking, Tom, I said, Tom, fancy coming to Blackpool? He was like, yeah, but I don't know why. It was like, my grandma lives in Blackpool. We're going to capture her life story. We're going to get it on film. We're going to give it to my family for Christmas. And when we did that, we interviewed my grandma 2020 and it was amazing. She shared things that I'd never known. She talked about the war, rations. She talked about my granddad at the age of 12 years old, cycling from Blackpool to Darwin, close to Blackburn, where she lived in the summer holidays to go and visit her, only for her to be on holiday herself. So she wasn't there. So we had to cycle all the way back. Like all these things that I had no idea about, right? And at the time of 2020, I gave it to my family for Christmas on a USB stick and said, look, this is grandma's life story. And everyone loved it. So Tom and I continue to have this conversation like, this is special. And we looked around and we could not find any other company capturing life stories of families and putting them into films. We could find many putting them into books, and we could find many doing it in audio, but we couldn't find anyone doing it into film. And we thought, you know what? There's something really special about this. Family legacy is so important. And just from my own perspective, it's just so vital and it gives so much meaning. So we started StoryOak in, I want to say, February 2023. It took us 2 years to develop. We then basically get asked to capture people's life stories, usually a parent or a grandparent, often a couples, where they bring their husband and wife together. So they talk about their individual journeys, their journeys together, and then the children they may have had or grandchildren. And then we can even bring wider angles where we bring the family into it. So it's basically a family tree of the family as told by the family. I know it sounds like really special and unique, but it's also really simple and really beautiful. So that these individuals then as a family will have those stories forever. And it's just really special. If you truly understand your family legacy, it gives meaning to where you're at and how you got to where you're at today.
100%. Yeah. Were your family emotional when you shared that first video of your grandma?
Yeah, I think they were. I think my grandma was really emotional, which is great, and my two aunties and my mum were emotional. But I think the true aspect of the beauty of this, my grandma's still here. She's like 87 or something. She's like killing it, and she's still like, she's lived by herself, does everything by herself. She's amazing. The thing that we found is when that person passes away, it takes on a whole new level of meaning. And that brings to it a really, really special piece because you're yearning in grief. You're yearning to speak to that person, to have that person there. And exactly the same for me and my granddad. I still, to this day, wish I had that video of my granddad that I could refer back to whenever I wanted. And when you're feeling a bit down or lonely, you could just be like, right, there you go. And just we do it in 3 to 5 episodes. So they're shorter episodes. Have 15 minutes where he's sharing his story about some challenges that he overcame when he was 30 years old. And he's just like, you know what? Life's bigger than you. And he gives you that realization.
How did you decide what types of questions to ask people? Because I'm guessing that the questions you ask are quite different than the questions that, people know about already.
Yeah, so the question side of it, we had to simplify it out. We had to go chronologically, and we had to go from childhood, and we call it golden years. So to where you're at today. And within each section of that, so you've got childhood, teenage years, early adulthood, and it kind of goes up in those. And each then we give 10 questions. And those questions, the individual gets to choose. We ask 3 to 5 questions to answer out of each of those sections. Once they've answered those questions, we've then got a profile of that individual. And then basically on the interview day, when we do the filming, my role is to uncover everything around what they've already shared, but anything that they've also not shared. But we go off the individual and what they want to share. Often we found the questionnaires are completed by either the parent or grandparent and the individual who's purchasing the story as well. So it's done as like a little family event in itself where they're like asking questions and getting to do it. So it's really special. It really is bringing people together in a different, unique way. So yeah, there's just so much that we've uncovered with StoryOak, but with both the organizations I built, if I tried to get to where I am today at the beginning and tried to figure that out, I would never have started because I would have been so overwhelmed. So I just had to do and uncover it as the journey went.
Yeah, I think that's good for people to have as advice, really, that you do have to sometimes just give things a go in order to learn along the way, because there can often be a barrier that scares people off the actual beginning something or trying something out because they're striving for perfection. Whereas if you actually just give it a go, you'll learn these things along the way. If you look back to it, like when you started out, what are the biggest things that you've learned that you just would have had no idea about unless you did them yourself?
everything that I'm doing to this day. But let's take it. If 2016 going to Uganda, right? I'd never ran a marathon in my entire life. I'd never run more than 10K. Okay. And that was whilst chasing a football. Right. So I'd never done anything more than that. I'd never been to Africa. I'd never volunteered. I'd never done any of that. I came up with a plan, a brief plan, wasn't very concrete, and I did it. I said, I'm going to do it. I went and did it. People said to me, have you been to Africa? They questioned who I was helping, where the money was going, all of this kind of, and often my answer would be, I don't know. I've never done it before. That's why I'm doing it. I'm here to learn as much as I can. Running a homeless outreach group, I'd never done that before when I came back to England. But I did it. Starting a social enterprise, sharing people's stories, being a storyteller. That's mad. Like me, I was bottom of the class in English. Awful. I'm a terrible writer, right? But somehow I'm seen as a storyteller, a person who creates opportunities for people to share their stories. I like to prefer to say that I'm a space creator, that I create spaces for people to share their stories. But it's just taking action, asking my grandma to share her story. Had an idea, went and did it, and I can't express how important taking action is. It's so easy to be a person of words. It's so hard to be a person of action, but action speaks louder than words, and I think that's the thing that I really want to embrace in my life. On my tombstone at the end is, what was Krish? He was a person of action, right? That's it. I might not have known what I was doing, but my God, I tried my best.
Well, you definitely come across as someone that is a person of action. So I get a real sense of that. I want to ask you what it is about you specifically that makes people want to share their stories with you.
Wow, that's a really good question. I really struggled with that question, but me specifically, some of my traits is that I really care about other people. I love to listen. Part of storytelling and the part of communication and dialogue is not just speaking. It's just listening and creating a space without trying to think of the answer or a response that you're going to give that person whilst they're still speaking, and just being there, present in that moment. How often do you get an opportunity to be present in the moment like this right now? Helen, I'm not thinking about what I've got to do later. I'm here. We're speaking together. It's a really beautiful space to provide you to this moment, and I think that's really important. So presence, the power of listening. I'm curious. I'm really curious. And also, I know that I've not mastered any of this. I know that I'm pretty poor at a lot of things that I do. And I don't ever want to be the master of any of this. I don't want to have made it. I don't want to get comfortable in my own ego. I always want to be someone who's learning from others. And I think that spirit of learning and the fact that I can learn something from every single person that I come across is something that I really want to embrace and want to encourage others to do the same. And the other thing that I really try not to do is try not to judge people. When I'm on my lowest points and sometimes I'm having a bit of a bad day or I'm exhausted, yes, I may judge people, and I may, out of emotion, say something. However, I really strive in not judging people at that moment when they're sharing that story. And I really need to then go and process what they've shared, because so many times people have judged me. They've said, Krish is this, Krish is that. Most of the time, I don't even know who or what I am. So how can someone else judge who or what I am when I don't even know myself most of the time? So it's that kind of taking judgment out of the space. They're the things that I feel that are important to me. I don't know whether that's what it is. Maybe it's a feeling of feeling inspired, or the other thing that I think is unique, usually I talk about this with public speaking, but your energy is so important. There's nothing worse than someone who drains your energy when you need someone to give you a boost. So how can you provide what that person who comes across you needs? And often it's, that infectious energy is that you can achieve anything. You can do anything you want. Don't put yourself into that box. Take yourself out of it and realize just how vast this universe is and how much you can be. So that's kind of who I am and how I go about what I do. But I think I struggle with, I'm not sure why people are happy to be part of this storytelling space with me, but I'd like to think maybe they're some of the values.
Definitely. One of the things you talked about was being non-judgmental, and I think that's obviously really important. How do you then deal with the fact that once you have created the story, once you have worked with someone to tell it together, if you share it somewhere, so for example, people's stories of lived experience, there might be other people's judgments and things that are applied onto that.
That's fine. So other people's judgments is their experiences. And to be fair, that's perfect. Uh, when we share our stories, we can't then prejudge how someone else is going to feel from that. That's not our right. I have no right into to someone else's emotions. What I do have the right to is to be able to share that story, put it out there, and hopefully the people who listen or watch that story can take something that applies to their life. That's what I have the rights to. Even if, obviously, I'm thinking of it in a positive way, if it's in a negative way, that's also their right. If they have a negative view of that story, or if that story doesn't apply to their life, I truly believe there's something to learn from every single person you can come across. Like, that is the spirit that I truly believe in the way that I live my life. So any of our speakers that we come across, what is it that we can learn from them? It may be what not to do. I don't want to be like that. I don't want to go through the same challenges that they want. That may be the thing, but there's something to learn from everyone. And that's the spirit that when we do our inspiring talks that we do, when we go into organizations, when we help uncover stories and people hear those stories, the people that we do interact with, we do try to encourage them to try and remember that there's something to learn from every story you come across.
Yeah, I can see how that would definitely apply in specific scenarios. If you are working with someone who maybe they are somewhat vulnerable, maybe we've talked about obstacles today, some sort of difficult experience, and they're sharing their story and they receive any sort of judgment or maybe just difficult questions from a crowd, is that something you need to prepare them for? Or are there other considerations that you have to think of at all?
Yeah, I think there's definitely having that conversation with the individual. And I think that support is really key. And so if we take Jenny, for example, when he shared his story and we got a lot of negativity, I think the next day or 2 days later, I was at Jenny's house. I was outside. Right, Jenny, let's go for a conversation and let's just have a chat to see where he's at. I don't have the fortune to be able to visit every one of our champions because they live all over the world. But luckily, Jenny was in a hostel not far from Bury, actually. So I just popped over and saw him. So it's, how do you support the individual with where they're at? Sometimes it may be where they need professional help. They may need something deeper than what I can provide or what our team can provide. But I think just knowing their value and what we can do with that, I think that's really special. And that's all we can do. I can't promise what comments are going to come on the social media, but I can promise that I'll do my best to support that individual wherever I can.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. We are coming towards the end of the podcast now. So, first of all, I want to ask, is there anything that you feel that you wanted to talk about today, but we've not had chance to cover?
Probably the one thing that I've probably not spoke about is I've talked about a lot about individuals. There's a responsibility that lies at the heart of organizations and companies. And I feel that this responsibility of bringing in lived experience and systems that we live in is not taken seriously. I think storytelling is not taken seriously. I don't think people are really put at the heart of the decisions that are made within organizations. As organizations, I think we have a responsibility to uncover the stories of our own people, to bring our people together, but also to realize where lived experience has a part to play. I think education systems as well is another part where, how is it that we go through the whole education system and we don't talk about entrepreneurialism? We don't bring in people who've lived the challenges that life is going to bring to you after you've come left school. From an organizational perspective, from a government and systems perspective, from an educational perspective, there's much more that we can be doing.
And would you say that it's something that is completely not done enough, or is it more that people are paying lip service to it and they're doing it a bit but not properly?
Both, all the way along that perspective. So you've got people who are doing nothing, like
Yeah.
zero. You've got people who are tick boxing, usually for that EDI requirements, and basically, oh yeah, we'll bring in a brown speaker to fulfill this requirement that we're looking for whatever awareness day it is, which can provide value. I have no doubt that can provide value, and it can plant a seed and support someone, but it is very much a one-off event. It's not a long-term thing that's going to create value and support in a longer-term perspective. And then you've got people who are literally like, we're doing our best to really showcase people, and to humanize the organization. Organizations are just built up of people, So sometimes when they say, oh, well, how do we change businesses, companies, organizations? They're just built up of people. And when you realize that people can change, organizations can change too.
Yeah, if you were speaking to someone who maybe they work at a big organization, let's say a charitable organization, and you feel like they could really benefit from involving people with lived experience more in the work that they do, what would you say that the key most important areas where bringing in a perspective of a person who's actually lived this thing and experienced this thing can really add to? What are the most important? And I know certainly that you can add it to any part of your work, but for you, what are the most important areas?
If we're looking at it from a perspective of bringing in an external provider, so for example, if you're looking at an organization within the third sector and they want to change their practices within diversity and inclusion, and they're bringing an external provider like us, like Tales Inspire, there's so much value to that. On this perspective, change doesn't come from within. If an organization has been going for 5, 10, 15, up to 100, 200 years, and they're finding the same challenges inside that organization, then you're just adding to the problem if you're inside that organization of whatever that problem is. The things that it brings, lived experience, whether it's internal or external, brings awareness, massive. Awareness about a story or a topic that people may not have known about. And it also brings empowerment. Wow, that's what I've been through. I'm not the only one who's gone through that. Boom, straight away. It brings, and that connects with isolation, cohesion, brings people together. And so that's one. Performance. I think this is something that we miss, that we think we're doing something good. Let's give to charity. Let's support a not-for-profit organization. You do this, your people will perform better. It is proven through the research that when people feel empowered, they work better. When they feel listened to, when they feel heard, boom, guess what? You're going to get an employee who works better, performs better, and does better for the purpose that they're working for. Alternatively, it might give some people some realization points that things need to change in that organization, which will benefit your organization. If you bring in lived experience, it will help your team and organization, and your margins and your bottom line. Everything will be beneficial.
Definitely. I've got one final question for you, and I like to ask this to everybody. Obviously, the topic of the podcast is all about influence. It's called Mad Influence. And so, could you tell me about one specific, it could be a moment or a person in your life that has influenced you that we haven't already covered today? So I know you mentioned some things already, but a specific thing that you think has really influenced you and the person that you are today.
Yeah, there's a few, but I'm gonna go with one, and I wouldn't have picked this guy usually. There's an amazing. He's one of our Tales to Inspire champions, and he's called Dave Cornthwaite. I consider him a great friend, but I also consider him a mentor. And Dave, we shared his story. Let's say it was in 2021, or it was during COVID times, and he just bought a space, a glamping space in Lincolnshire. And he was doing it all up and getting it all ready. And the next day he said, well, on the podcast, just like this, he said, if you ever want to come, you're more than welcome. And I was like, all right. So the next day I turned up in Lincolnshire, right? Person of action, turned up in Lincolnshire. And him and Ems, his wife, like embraced me so much. And I was there helping him and doing some stuff. And this amazing like bromance has created from that. But Dave is someone He skateboarded across Australia, I think 4,500 miles. He's done ridiculous challenges and adventures around the world. He swam 1,000 miles down the Mississippi River. He's done all these incredible things. He has an organization called the Yes Tribe. He was one of Facebook's biggest community builders, and he's done so much. But for him to put his ego aside, or to see how much great things he is, but to care about the person in front of him, is so, so special. And I've learned so much from Dave. He's an amazing storyteller. We've done some fantastic work together as well. But he's just someone that I just think, that spirit, once again, of no matter how much you've achieved, you stand on the shoulders of great people. I am who I am today because of the great people that I've come across in my life and I've learned from. That is it. As much as I can take on board that I am now, I'm just extremely grateful for the people that I've had the opportunity to learn from, and I want to pay forward. And so I'm going to go with Dave. I hope he never listens to this because his head will get so big that he'll be like, man. But Dave Cornthwaite will be the person that I'd say.
Thank you. I think that is a great note to end on. I've really enjoyed speaking to you today, and I think it's been a really interesting conversation. So thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Helen.
If anybody wants to find you, where would you like me to send them?
Amazing. Thank you. So in terms of finding me, talestoinspire.com is our website. All our social media channels on Instagram and Facebook and YouTube is Tales to Inspire. Basically, Jeff, you can find out and reach out to me via there.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Thank you for listening to Mad Influence. This is the part of the episode where podcasters tend to ask you to subscribe and most people don't bother, but I would really appreciate it if you could do, because it sends a signal to the platforms to say that the content is good, more people get to see it, and we get to grow the podcast and invite more guests on in the future. So if you could press follow or subscribe on whatever platform you're listening to or watching this podcast, I would really appreciate it. Thank you.